It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. Thanks for tuning in to another FitLabPGH interview. Don't forget, movement tip and lifestyle hack videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on most social media channels. And every Thursday, we feature a FitLab Pittsburgh Features, a written feature of a two-legged or four-legged mover in the Pittsburgh area. If you like what you hear, please leave us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you listen to. Enjoy the interview. FitLabPGH back with another podcast interview. This time we traveled all the way to Mount Lebanon, but we did not have to go through a tunnel or across a bridge. We pick people and businesses and organizations in the Pittsburgh area, as you heard in the intro, who make movement a priority and really treat movement as a lifestyle, not just something you do and then move on to other things. And as you've heard me say before, many times we find people by seeing what they post on the internet. Specifically, Facebook and Instagram are great places to see pictures. And today's guest, we saw somebody who is very clearly an active mover and makes it a regular part of her life. And we like to hear the stories of people of why they move, how they move, and what got them started moving. So today we're talking with Shannon McKenzie. Shannon was kind enough to travel all the way from Robinson, so she didn't have to go through a bridge or over a tunnel either. So Shannon, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about what you do.
Thank you.
I guess the first question I always like to start out with FitLab Pittsburgh people is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why the heck are you still here? If not, what brought you to Pittsburgh?
I am from Pittsburgh. I am from the South Hills, so where we are right now isn't too far from where I grew up.
And I'm curious, just as somebody who's not a Pittsburgh native, now that you live out in the Robinson area, do you have friends from high school or growing up who don't come and visit you because it's too far away?
Yeah, sometimes. But like my mom, she won't cross the bridge or a river.
So it is true that what they say, it's not just what I say. And I'm always curious when we talk to people who are movers. Growing up, were you a mover? Did you play sports in high school or grade school? Or was it more along the lines where mom and dad said, hey, dinner time is at 6 o'clock, get the heck out of the house and don't come back until dinner time and come back dirty and tired?
I was usually pretty active growing up. My grandparents especially were into fitness and everything, so they were a big influence in my life. I did 5Ks with my grandfather when I was like 12 years old, and I went on my first hike with him when I was about 6, and so
I'm curious about that because I know regular movement, doing things like 5Ks and 10Ks, that's atypical for many people. Do you remember what was it that made that something that your grandparents did? Because, you know, before, say, 1990, if you were running around Pittsburgh, people probably looked at you and said, what are you doing? Why are you running?
I never really thought of it. I just always saw that, and that's what they did. And but not everybody else in our family followed in their footsteps, but I did.
And I'm curious, what keeps you doing that now? I mean, I know when you start out, I know when I first started doing 5Ks, like, you mean I can pay a little bit of money and I can end up with a T-shirt? And actually, we're sitting here, you're wearing a Hell on Hills T-shirt from the inaugural Hell on Hills. So that one, not only did you earn a T-shirt, but you earned the bragging rights of probably the steepest 5K, at least in Pittsburgh, but probably the world. I'm sure Bethany will correct me if I'm incorrect. So what is it that keeps you moving on a regular basis? Because I know as people get older, it's a lot easier to say, I don't have time because of jobs, other responsibilities, et cetera. And there's other people who it's like moving is just what they do. They run or they bike or they go to a fitness facility, and they can't imagine a day or most days of the week where they don't do that.
No, I wouldn't be happy if I couldn't get some kind of fitness or movement in my day. And on the last question, my grandfather, he also owned a sporting goods store. So that was part of why that was part of their life. I got free running shoes to run with them.
And I guess he could almost say, I have to do these things because I have to try out all the products. So when people ask me, well, how's this pair of shoes? I can say they're good or they're not so good. You might want to try these instead.
Yeah.
I know when I was entering graduate school, a gentleman who was a mentor of mine told my advisor or my to-be advisor that if Ben's ever in a lousy mood, send him out for a run and he'll do a lot better. You said you just wouldn't be happy if you didn't move. Is this something you found out as you grew older? There were periods of time where you weren't active and you realized, boy, I'm not as happy as I am when I move? Or is it just something you kind of intuitively knew that said, I know when I move, I'm happy and I just want to do this?
It's more intuitively for me. There hasn't been really a part of my life where I wasn't active. My interest in what I've done, whether it's been lifting or running, my focus has changed sometimes, but it's always been some kind of fitness I've been able to fit into my life.
And I know a lot of times when we interview people for FitLab Pittsburgh, it's like, well, why do you want to interview me? I'm not doing anything special. But I know one of the things that's out there is the majority of Americans don't move on a regular basis. I think 27% or something like that of Americans do absolutely no activity. So people often forget that if you're somebody who moves on a regular basis, whether it's gardening or whether it's running or biking or doing bodybuilding or something like that, you are the exception, even though we were chatting a little bit before recording. You think it's the norm because you tend to surround yourself with people who do similar things. And I'm curious I'm somebody who, when I started moving, I've stuck mainly with endurance sports, because since if you look at me, I would not be a very good bodybuilder. What is it that keeps you trying different things? I know we have the advantage of having a questionnaire, and you did some bodybuilding, and now you're more running and biking. What was it what is it that makes you say, I want to try different things? The new experiences or other options or other reasons?
Just different people I've ran into over the years have said, you know what, I think you could be good at this. Why don't you give it a try? And most of the things I've tried, I've had some success with. So,
have you tried anything that movement-wise that you weren't very successful? I know in my case, whitewater kayaking falls into that place. I specialize if you've ever done any whitewater kayaking, I am very good at doing a wet exit and hopping on top of the boat and kicking to shore. I'm not very good at keeping the boat upright.
Yeah, that's not my specialty. I'm definitely more into the endurance sports. I swim in pools, not in lakes or rivers. So that's why I really don't do a triathlon. But I do swim, bike, and run.
And if you had to pick one movement activity, what would it be? Would it be swimming? Would it be biking, running, hiking?
Running has always been my favorite. It's my passion.
And I think most people who move on a regular basis, they have a tendency, there's like one activity that they gravitate towards. And one of the great things about running is you don't need a whole lot of equipment. One of the bad things about running also is if you run long enough, as far as a number of years, you kind of say, okay, how far can I run or how fast can I run? And it's almost inevitable that there are no long-term runners out there who have not been injured. So one of the things that's really helpful for people who are either starting to run or regular runners, they listen to other people, and sometimes they can find out, oh, that one little tip is like, that's what I need to do or not do. Have you had any serious injuries, or are you knocking on wood and saying, I haven't had any yet, and I hope I don't?
Knock on wood, I haven't had any serious injuries, but I do, like if something starts to ache a little bit, I try to back off a little bit, and then once that's better, I, step up my training again.
And I'm also interested as far as with running goes. Do you have any favorite types of running to do? In my case, trail running is my favorite, and preferably long and slow with my dogs. What is your favorite places in Pittsburgh to run for people who maybe say, well, I only run at South Park, but I'd like to explore more places, or I only run at North Park, or I only run on the rails to trails? Where are some places that you run or that you would recommend to some FitLab Pittsburgh listeners? Don't give away your favorite places that you don't want to see a whole bunch of people going to.
No, actually, my favorite is probably the Montour Trail. I like the flat, and the surface is actually, I feel that's my favorite surface to run on, as opposed to like pavement and on the roads. I can do more miles on there without, feeling it from the road. And in Upper St. Clair, that
Gilkison Farm, I think.
Yes, yeah, that's one of my favorites around there. There's a big hill, but I really love that. It's a little bit shaded in the woods. Nice.
And I know I have one of my clients runs there, and he tells me I need to go there. I think it's a little bit over a mile. There's something like 200 or 300 feet of elevation gain, and apparently it's very, very soft because they put all kinds of mulch down. So it's not easy if you're looking for something easy, but as you said, it's supposed to be really a good workout, especially the hill.
Yeah, I love that one. I did it. I've run it a lot, especially more so when I lived out here. But if I had the chance, I'd go run that or the trail. Mostly, I stick around in my neighborhood because I try to get my training done in the morning before I get to work. So I'm hating hills, getting tired of hills right now because I do it every day.
And yet you live in Pittsburgh, so it's kind of hard to avoid that, isn't it? I'm curious also, I know one of the things that people often say is, well, I can't work out in the morning. And I'm somebody, if I don't get my workout in by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, it's like, it's not going to happen. I'm not one of those people that says, okay, I'm going to finish my day and we're doing this interview at about 5 o'clock. It's like the chances of me actually going out at 5 or 5:30 and doing some sort of movement for the day isn't going to happen. Have you always been an early morning person for your workouts, or is it more along the lines of you just realized when you started working, it's like, I just can't do a day's work and then go out and do my movement?
Yeah, that's how it is for me right now. Since my job is pretty active, I really don't have the energy to do like a real intense workout afterwards. So I make sure I do that in the morning. In high school, the workouts were always after school. And then when I went into college, for a while I ran for Slippery Rock, and we would do a pool workout in the morning or weights. We'd have our morning workout, and then we would do our running workout in the evening.
And now that damn job gets in the way, so you can't work out twice a day.
Sometimes I do.
My favorite question I always ask people that we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh, it's actually a two-part question, is you're sitting around, you're talking with other friends who are regular movers, and everybody's kind of talking about the neat event that they did, something that maybe they're most proud of, or maybe it's the most unusual. I even had somebody said, I took a yoga class once, that was enough. Is there one event that you're kind of most proud of, or you kind of remember the most, like, this is something, or this is an activity that, man, I may or may not do it again, but it was really enjoyable for me, and it's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life?
In particular, no, not really one event, but I was pretty surprised that last year I still hit a PR at 39 years old, so I was pretty excited about that.
They say 40 is the new 20, so maybe there's a whole string of PRs coming up. And then my other question, this is to give me ideas to keep me moving. Is there any activity or movement-related activity that's on your list? It's like, I may not do it this year, I may not do it next year, but at some point I'm going to do it. I'm still waiting for somebody to say I'm going to climb Mount Everest, or I'm going to scuba dive with sharks, but I'm always looking for new and interesting ideas that other people think that this is something I want to do.
Well, the one thing that I had always wanted to do was bicycle the Gap Trail, and I was actually able to do that this summer. So I was real excited about that. We didn't go all the way to D.C., but I did do from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland. And
I guess the question always is with that, would you do it again if you have the time?
Possibly. I'd really like to do the second part. If I was going to do it again, I'd want to do the second part.
That's one of the things that's on my bucket list. It's just a matter of finding the 4, 5, 6 days that it takes to do that, and that's always hard to do.
But I do recommend anybody, if they're wanting to do that, to try that. It was a real good experience.
And I know one of the things that I've found, I've lived in too many places. In Pittsburgh, you mentioned that the Montour Trail is your favorite place to run. And I think the rails to trails around Pittsburgh are those really remarkable gems that a lot of people just don't recognize. Those of us who know about them have a tendency to take them for granted, but they're really gems. I'm curious with your cycling, since if you're going to ride from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland, you can't just get up one day and say, hey, I've got a few days next week, let's ride from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland. You actually have to have some biking miles, because you may have the cardiovascular fitness, but we all know that with a bike you got to get your butt in shape too, and that doesn't come other than sitting on the saddle. Do you use the Montour Trail as your favorite place to bike also, or do you go on the roads?
Yeah, I only bicycle on the rails to trails. I really stay away from bicycling on the road. But to get my miles in, I pretty much all summer keep my bicycle with me in my vehicle. So anytime I get the chance to get it in, I can take my bicycle out and get on the trail.
And that's one of those things for people who are wondering, well, I get home and I don't have time. You don't have to get home. You can't get home and run into, well, if I just answer this email, well, I just want to check my social media feed. Well, let me start something for dinner. The bike's there, and if the weather's good, there really isn't an excuse. I'm always curious because right now it's, I think, 85, 90 degrees out. A couple months from now, it's probably going to be 70, 80 degrees colder than this. And I know we've interviewed some people who say, it doesn't matter what the weather is. I run outside year-round. We know you can't always bike outside year-round if there's a lot of ice on it. But are you a year-round outside runner? Do you bike when it's cold, or is this something that there's kind of like a threshold? If it gets below this temperature, it's like I'm back inside on the treadmill.
Well, for bicycling, probably by the end of September, when that Tour de Montour happens, that's probably about the end of my bicycling. After that, it gets too cold. But last winter, I was able to run most days. There were a few days that I missed, but I don't run every day. Usually, at least one day out of the week, I'll go to the gym and do something else.
What if somebody told you for the next month you could only run inside on the treadmill? Would you be happy with that, or would you go bonkers?
I would have to make it work.
It's a very good political answer. I'd be honest, for me, I'd go bonkers.
No, I could do it. I have, with my phone, put music on, watch a video on YouTube. The time will go fast.
And I think you've hit on something that by running mostly on trails, you save your body. And you mentioned that last year you were 39, so you're really good for the next few years, and then things start to catch up with you. The wear and tear and the running and the soft surfaces are great. When you do your races, do you do races only on soft surfaces also, or do you also go and do hard surface races?
Most of races are on the road, but I do 5K distance and possibly 10K, so I'm not doing marathon miles on the road.
People always want to ask, when you say you're a runner, they're going to say, have you ever done a marathon, or are you going to do a marathon?
I have done one marathon in 1999. I did the Pittsburgh Marathon.
The first edition of the Pittsburgh, or the first rendition of the Pittsburgh Marathon then. And did that leave you with, okay, I've done a marathon, that's off the bucket list, I never want to do it again, or did that leave you with, if I ever have the time again?
Well, I still remember about how I couldn't walk down steps for like a week after. And I did, a few years ago, I did try to do the Pittsburgh Marathon again, but I had a hamstring cramp after a few miles in, so I only quit after half, and I haven't attempted it again.
So it's one of those things, maybe someday, but if it doesn't happen, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
I would consider probably a trail marathon, but probably not on the road.
And I know from some of your social media pictures, you're a big photographer. Is that something that on your runs you carry the phone, or you carry, or is this separate movement activities outside just to take pictures?
It's usually along with me being out on the bicycle or me being out on the trail and just sharing what I see and enjoy out there.
And I know there's some times when you're out there, you see things you don't imagine. I was fortunate enough this winter taking my dogs to the park. I actually saw 3 deer swimming across the stream, which I had never seen before. And I actually got it on my phone. It's like, I usually don't carry my phone, and I'm glad I carried it that, because it's one of those things like, you don't get that. And I know part of movement, there's some people that it's just built in. That's kind of their time to think, and it's their private time where they don't want to be around people. There's other people, it's like they have groups of friends that they like to run with. They don't want to work out, whether it's running or biking or lifting. They're a class person, or they always like to run with somebody. Are you somebody who is more of a solo exercise, or in one or two people, or do you prefer like large group runs and large group rides for bicycling?
I do most of my training by myself. But I prefer my training to be by myself when I'm like more focused on training. But if it's more of a relaxed workout, that's when I enjoy being with other people.
So the actual work takes place when you can concentrate, and then kind of what some people would term the junk miles or the more fun miles, or kind of this is the time to socialize and have fun.
Yes.
I know anybody who's a long-time runner, even if they've said, I'm not sure if I want to do a marathon, there's always some race, not necessarily a distance, but some race somewhere that at some point they're gonna do, or they're gonna figure out a way to do it. I know for me in the Catskill Mountains, there's an escarpment run, which is on my bucket list to do sometime. I have to run a marathon so that I can get a qualifying time to get into it. But is there some running event somewhere in the country or the world that's like, at some point I'm going to find my way to go and do that?
Nothing that's planned, but I'm always looking. Like when I went on vacation to the beach a couple months ago, I wasn't planning on doing a race, but as we were heading down there, I was looking online and I saw a race that was nearby, and I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this," and I won the overall female, and it was fun. It was flat, which was nice for a change. And
I know one of the things people in Pittsburgh is, I don't like running the hills, but as you do, you have to do the hills. Then you're fortunate enough to go someplace flat. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, this isn't quite as hard as it is at home. And I know when I moved, I lived in Florida for 5 years where it is flat. And when I moved to Pittsburgh, it took me 3 years to get used to the hills because I thought I was going to die every time I went up the hill. So hills are nature's built-in interview. Or, excuse me, hills are nature's built-in intervals, not interview. We've been talking with Shannon McKenzie, a lifetime mover. I think one of the most important things that we do with FitLab Pittsburgh is we try to interview people who make movement a priority. And I think it's important to get people out moving and to make you realize that that person you see running down the road, or that person you happen to see standing up on the podium with the first place women's medal, has a story, and they started somewhere, and not every run is easy. So Shannon, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about your movement, and I hope you still continue to post those pictures on Instagram because I love seeing wildlife pictures.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.